What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
Beginning even before the war, for enthusiasts working at ZIS decided to create a powerful sports car that would attract attention, with its spectacular forms alone. Of course, they also paid attention to the technology, but the car was initially tried to make not even flashy, but simply beautiful. Oriented on the world's supercars, designers Pulmanov, Pukulin, and Kremenetsky together with the artist Valentin Ruskov had to stop on the frame from the government. Limousine ZIL-101, because of what the car received a body of impressive length, which, however, did not affect the technical characteristics. Monumental ZIL-101 became the basis for the future racing car after all. After modification, the force motor gave out 141 horses, thanks to which the car with streamlined forms easily accelerated to 150 km per hour, although according to the calculations of the creators could go much faster. During the shooting races in September 1940, the factory races on the ZIS-101A Sport were able to gain 162.46 km per hour at a distance of 1 kilometer on the move. Unusual mission. Further work and development of the history of the sporty ZIS was hindered by the short and sad word war. But the factory management had its own plans for this car, and it was by no means only about trivial participation in Soviet or international races. No, in extreme modes racing ZIS could give the plant designers an answer to very important questions. Will the nodes of government limousines withstand heavy loads and even huge overloads? How will the chassis behave at high speeds? Will the brakes be enough in a critical situation? How fast can a car with such a chassis accelerate to while still being controllable? Racing full-fledged limousines was somehow out of the question, especially since a race car allowed to get answers faster, sharper, and more accurately. That's why in the early 50s at ZIS created a separate structure, the Laboratory of High-Speed Cars of the Experimental Shop, which staff included leading designers and artists of future ZIL cars, in fact, the best of the best specialists that the plant had at that time. And it is clear that it was not about races and possible successes. The result of the work of this team was ZIS-112, a car, the base for which was already ZIS-110, and the basis of the design, as in the previous time, was a standard frame of the Moscow limousine. This just indicated that the car was destined for the role of a test bench, but not a racing car in its usual sense. The car was too long and heavy by racing standards, and its units and assemblies were not so much sporty as sporty. This gave away the idea of the project, which was created to test the chassis and power unit of the ZIS-110 in near sporting conditions. The increased loads had to reveal the advantages or disadvantages of serial parts of the Soviet limousine, and the prototype coped perfectly with this mission. The only thing in which the designers broke away from the original was a mixed, i.e. both lower and upper at the same time, valve arrangement engine, where the intake valves were placed at the top of the engine, and the exhaust valves at the bottom. Increasing the compression ratio from 6.85 to 1 to 7.5 to 1, the designers managed to increase the power to 182 horsepower, so that the 112th was able to take the cherished mark of 200 km per hour. Refined controllability or sharpness of reactions to the car, despite its potential, was not required, because at that time it was accepted multiple speed runs on the same section in different directions. No dynamic starts from a place, no drifting. The car had to drive through a given area at the highest possible speed without breaking down. Taking into account the maximum load and high speed, the reliability of aggregates, first of all, the engine, came to the forefront. And such a feature of the competition was in perfect harmony with the peculiarities of limousine operation, where in the technical task the high maximum speed for obvious reasons was surprisingly combined with the highest requirements to the reliability of the engine and everything else. Passed to the world of racing in the mid-50s, the USSR championship was transferred to closed circular tracks, which were full of steep and not so steep turns. Because of this, the laboratory's ZIS-112 with its long base and considerable body weight was not too well suited for real racing work, because it was too heavy and clumsy. Nevertheless, the new regulations of the competition at first did not greatly affect the approach of the ZILovs to the creation of their car, and the 6-liter monster remained in proud solitude, competing, in fact, with itself. Neither Pobeda nor Moskvich could compete with it in terms of power. However, the battle test showed that the ZIL-112 situation was rather sad. Too long wheelbase, high curb weight and overloaded front axle did not allow this car to go for all the money. That's why by the new racing season the frame was shortened by 60 centimeters, thanks to which the distance between the axles was reduced from 3760 to 3160 mm. For comparison, the wheelbase of the Lada Larga station wagon is only 2,905 mm. The body became completely open, and only a small windshield covered the pilot from the wind. The curb weight was reduced by 600 kilograms, and the axle weight distribution was improved. The designers did not forget about the engine, increasing its power up to 195 horsepower. In 1957 races, Petrov and Abramov on ZIL-112 were able to take the championship of the country. However, the designers of the racing ZIS were drawn not just to the racetracks, but to the great sport of the world, so they thought about creating a fundamentally new car, the original chassis of which would comply with the technical regulations of the International Automobile Federation FIA. 112 family working on the racing theme. By trial and error, ZIS designers managed to create not one, but several series of prototypes. Of the 112 family cars, which received the indexes 112 to 1, 112 to 2 and 112 to 3, and there was some confusion with these designations. Some blurriness of the concept was not clarified by the next three models ZIL-112-4, ZIL-112-5 and ZIL-112-6. And at this point, the factory racers faced a harsh reality, which turned out to be the word handicap, which the racing cars of this brand constantly faced from 1952 to 1960. All these ZILs did not demonstrate any special sporting achievements, so the plant decided to start, if not with a clean sheet, then at least with a new and big letter C. The technical assignment for ZIL-112S sounded as follows: it is necessary to create a high-speed automobile, which would be used to improve serial units of passenger cars and to test fundamentally new units, which have a prospect of application on passenger cars of the plant. That is, nobody cancelled the concept of a testing laboratory on wheels and a racing aggregate carrier even 10 years later the plant. Management supported the initiative of the Laboratory of High-Speed Cars, which resulted in a directive ordering the experimental shop to prepare technical documentation for the ZIL-112S, as well as the creation and testing of the ZIL-112S car by December 1, 1958. However, the frame from steel pipes could be welded only at the end of 1960, and the body at the same time was designed by specialists of the Design Bureau of Passenger Cars. Its resemblance to the racing Ferrari 250 Testarossa is so obvious that it is foolish to deny it, but the identity of the forms may well be due to the dictatorship of speed. At least it's hard to accuse ZIL's artists of imitating something they may not have even seen. A collection of innovations, the designers were instructed to maximize the use of units and assemblies of the serial limousine ZIL-111. On the racing car, you must agree, not the most trivial point for the technical task taking into account the context. Elite donor. The six-window limousine ZIL-111 became a donor of aggregates for ZIL-112S. But let's not forget about what it was all for. The layout remained quite traditional, longitudinally located in front of the engine and rear driving wheels. But the engine was thoroughly overhauled, paying special attention to the timing mechanism and power supply system. Well, the unusual exhaust system was noticeable to anyone who cast even a fleeting glance at the body of the 112th. After all, the exhaust manifolds went from each cylinder separately, going outside behind the front wheels and merging therein. The common exhaust duct, more precisely, a pair of trunk lines located in the base on each side of the body. The only thing in what the power unit had to seriously deviate from the donor, transmission. The automatic transmission was not suitable for a sports car, so the ZIL-112S received a gearbox and clutch from ZS-110. However, the rear suspension was not without surprises from the creators. Instead of the traditional dependent rear suspension, the designers used the De Dion scheme, which was practically never used on Soviet cars. The rear wheels of the ZIL-112S were connected by a rigid cross beam, which was movable relative to the frame, because with the latter, it was connected through a system of push rods and levers. The gearbox was rigidly mounted on the frame, and the torque was transmitted to the wheels through half axles with cardan joints. Due to the fact that the car was going to perform both on the ring and for setting speed records, the main gear was made two-stage. where in addition to the permanent pair with a gear ratio of 3.09, there was an additional easily removable one, which allowed to choose sets with different versions of gear ratios from 2.62 to 3.64. Light wheels received a quick-release hub of the Rudge-Whitworth type, to put it bluntly, an exotic type of mounting for a Soviet machine, albeit a racing one. To the tires of 700-16 size on stamp discs were soon added a couple more tires, 600-16 and 670-15 respectively. The rest of the components and parts of the chassis and braking system, a hodgepodge from Victory, GAZ-13 and ZIL-111. The use of Victory components was explained simply. The creators of the car wanted to make it faster and lighter. And in their desire they went so far that they made a special fiberglass body for ZIL-112S, without optics and protruding spigots. And the driver's seat was closed with a special lantern like the one used on fighter planes of those years. Going for a record, but we miss it was decided to make a record run on the Salt Lake Baskinchak, where by that time there was a 20-kilometer ring. Alas, due to heavy summer rains, it was possible to prepare only about 6 kilometers of salt surface for speed runs, on which it was possible to accelerate up to 236 kilometers per hour on the record streamlined body. This, of course, is noticeably less than the estimated 260 kilometers per hour, but also quite a lot even by today's standards. Later it was conceived another attempt to set another record, this time in a 24-hour race, for which they planned to use the newly commissioned Dmitrov Auto Polygon, but later it was cancelled, considering it inexpedient. In 1962, the car received all disc brakes and traditional wheel mounting with 5 nuts on the rim instead of one central one. Then in the streamlined womb of the ZIL-112S appeared a new heart, the engine ZIL-114, which differed from the serial 100. 14th by a reduced displacement, 6.5 litres, and less power, 264 horsepower. In 1965 on chassis number 2G, Zhukov managed to become the USSR champion in Formula 5, free, where technical regulations allowed participation of cars with different weight and engine power. In the period from 1967 to 1970 races V. Bogatov, N. Zhdanov and N. Razanchev also set 3 all-union speed records in Class 10. Alas, the very concept of the car with almost 7-litre engine was at odds with the light single-seater cars that conquered all classes of racing circuits of those years. ZIL-112S was simply out of business. The car had nowhere and no reason to perform. So the racing career of the 112th ended in 1970, although its life cycle was not over. In the second half of the 70s, both cars were purchased by the Riga Antique Car Club, after which one of the cars was restored. And not quite authentic, because the body was painted in fire bright red color. But later the car became white, and since 1989 it has been on display for everyone to see in the Riga Motor Museum. According to rumors, the first prototype after the transfer to the club was crashed on the highway in Baikoniki and did not get to the museum, and in the dashing 90s left the former territory of the USSR forever, becoming the property of a certain Swedish collector. In conclusion, the ZIL-112S stands as a remarkable testament to the innovative spirit of Soviet automotive engineering. From its ambitious inception in the early 1960s to its impressive performances on the racetrack, this racing car not only showcased the potential of ZIL but also reflected the broader aspirations of a nation during a transformative era. Despite its eventual decline and the challenges faced by the ZIL brand, the legacy of the ZIL-112S endures, reminding us of a time when speed and design converged in a pursuit of excellence. As we look back on its history, we appreciate not just the engineering feats, but also the passion and dedication that drove its development. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the fascinating world of the ZIL-112S.